start, Barry. I assume you've heard of there's a med mal lawyer in New York that has done a great job using YouTube over the years, out of the Ben Glass world, that really did an amazing job cornering the market of YouTube, just making Jerry Oginski, went and became friends with him early on, and maybe like 8-9 years ago, me and then intern David Brenton, who's now president of Blue Shark, we took the train up and sat in his living room for a day, just sort of seeing all the magic that he was doing. Really impressive with limited resources. He's done crazy things.
Like we also have Christy here. Hi, Christy.
Hey, Christy, since we have a small crowd today, tell us a little bit in the chat about what you do and what you're trying to accomplish so we can try to tailor this for you. And now we got Linda. Same thing, Linda. We're going to have a small crowd. I want to try to make this narrow down. We have Darren, who does both technology, but focused in the in PI space as well as the employment space. We have Barry, Chicago solo, doing PI, leveraging YouTube. So we will give it one more minute and then we will dive in. Where in Virginia are you, Christy? Very cool. A lawyer that I know that had done criminal back in the day converted to family in your market. It was, now I'm blanking on it. I'll get it for you. She had done criminal, converted, Liberty grad, which I know doesn't limit it in your market, but I'll figure that out and ping you with it. Cool. So we can get going. What I will try to do, since I know we have PI, we have, and Linda, did you tell us what you do? We have PI, we have family, a little bit of employment. I'm going to try to give you a twofer in our time here today. And again, please keep the questions coming since it's so small. I'd rather you get your questions answered and focus on what we can do to help you build and grow your businesses. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Seth Price. I'm the founder of Blue Shark Digital, also the managing partner of Price Benno, which is a DC-based firm, 40 lawyer shop that goes across disciplines as a PI department, criminal. We are, trust and estates, immigration, and family. So I sort of used my firm as a test kitchen and then got so geeked out on the digital that I created Blue Shark Digital. And we have Emily White and Nalini Prasad from our team here. And, we are, today, the hot topic that I want to talk to you about today are LSAs. And I think that that's important, but I'm going to give you about a 5-minute overview before we turn to that on the basics of SEO. Because to me, if you heard my presentations earlier, digital, I love. And I get that for somebody who is sort of smaller and has less resources, like a Barry who's trying to do everything himself, that this can be overwhelming. But I feel like the fundamentals are so important. I just want to make sure that we have the basic fundamentals down, and then we're to pop into what's new and happening with LSAs. So technical SEO, the coding, the link building, very important, content strategy, and your local. So technical, we'll start with that of those 4 areas. The optimization, this is the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So it's kind of unfair to start with this because these are the things that for most lawyers, at least desirous. It's making sure that the Google bot can read your website in a way that allows for it to understand what's there, just like a human that goes through. We can't just put pages of content the way we want to see, have a human see it, but Google has gotten so good over the last few years that they're able to figure it out, but they're testing for things. How fast does your pages load? Do you have a description that tells you what this page is about? Title tags, that's not new, but schema markup's more recent, making sure that every ability that you have to tell Google what's going on that you use and take advantage of. So content as a baseline, authoritative content. That is what's going to differentiate you from somebody else. Figuring out how do you create stuff. As Barry talked about in the chat, he's really big with YouTube. Whether you use YouTube videos and transcribe them, whether you use print content, the idea is to have things that both answer people's questions, but also are sticky for the people to stay on page. So in a perfect world, if you have the resources, what I love is getting away from a blog format where you just put interesting articles, but rather written content about all the different things you want to be found for, supplemented with videos the way that Barry or Jerry Oginski is doing, and using that so you get people to the page. The Google bot is coming by and finding this information, but once the user gets there, Google's going to say, hey, people are there and they're sticking to this content because you're giving them either answers to their questions or information that is rich and is relevant to their search query versus stuff that is not relevant to their search queries where they're going to bounce. The idea is to create the content that is most sticky. So these are the different ways that we love to get people authoritative content, becoming a trusted source, creating FAQ videos, establishing a brand by niching down. If you're in PI, saying, hey, I'm going to be the king of dog bites, or I'm going to be huge in bike accidents, I'm a big biker. If you find that area and can set yourself apart, those are the areas, because if you do that and you create good content, not only will it resonate, not only will the Google bot find it, but what I love about it is that the home run, the full 360, is when that content gets links. If Barry's videos resonate and somebody sees it and references it, that's SEO. Great content with authoritative link building, that 1-2 combination. So link building. This is the reciprocal side of content and links. And a link is the backlink coming from other people demonstrating authority to your site. And meaning if somebody else is voting to say, hey, this is good content and this is something that is worthy, that the Google bot will say, hey, as we come through, we're scrolling through with our bot and seeing the content, but we're also able to measure the people that are voting on this website and this web page as authoritative in the form of link equity. Higher quality backlinks better than lower, with the one exception being people who are doing local. And if you're doing local, even though you may have an organization that's not as authoritative, but Google perceives as important in the LECO ecosystem, those links are very important as well. So how do you do this? How do you get these links? One of the ways that people have done it is taking what's traditional marketing for a law firm, where a generation before you might sponsor the Little League team or donate to a gala. My attitude now as the next generation is that's great that they want to donate, or I want to donate to something. I don't care so much about being in the pamphlet at the event. What I care about is the link from their website, because that's an association with a trusted place that shows that there is something there. And the more you create those relationships, the more you can show Google that you are trusted within that region. And that is what we see. The combination of content and links together is what allows for people to resonate and move up in the search engine results to get more traffic and more conversions. So local search, this is the fourth of the 4 legs of the pillar. And this is where we're starting to move into what we'll talk about in a moment, which is LSAs, right? So it's everything we just talked about, the organic search, content, links, technical, right? But now Google My Business and looking at things like reviews, pictures on those on your Google My Business, finding these local links that come in and doing everything you can to demonstrate you are the best local answer. Something Nalini talks about when she lectures is using the example of like pizza near me. Like you just need the closest darn place that gets you hot pizza. But with a lawyer, there's a little bit more leeway. And so for here, we need to show for a region what is the best possible answer. And that is why we're doing everything we can to sculpt the results to give people that very positive, popular outcome that, hey, we have the content, we have the links, and now locally, we have reviews and we have local links all pointing together to demonstrate that you're the best answer to get part of that very valuable map pack of 3. And Google My Business is that interface. And the reason that this is about to be important is the reviews that for a long time were important for local search and for 3-pack optimization, we are now seeing as we move into this local service ad world that lawyers have now been open to. So we have all this information in the 3-pack in the GMB. We want to continue to fill this and take advantage of every bell and whistle, whether it be post, whether it be pictures, whether it be video. We want to be as rich as possible. Google likes this. It's their real estate. Let's take advantage of it. And as you start to go through life, you see more and more places where people are basically making buying decisions in hotels directly from the GMB. Google wants to see, hey, if we can get somebody a GMB result, which is our real estate, and they make a phone call and that gives them a good positive result, that 360, that closed loop is something Google loves. And we want to make sure for us and our clients that we are able to provide that information so that it's a great user experience and that the Google platform is fully utilized. So here is the cause celeb, local service ads. This is something that right now it's been rolled out for about 6 months in legal. In the poll, how many people here have actually tried and used LSAs or been verified? Love to get that feedback because, right now in the B2C world, and everything I speak about is the business to consumer world, right? So Tara, Salt Lake City, family law, great space. So everybody who is utilizing LSAs, it is the area that appears above the 3-pack. It's a pay-per-call model. It's not per click. And the idea is that you can go through a screening process where you give your malpractice insurance, your bar information, and once you pass it, there's a green check mark at the top. Really valuable real estate. And right now, for the foreseeable future, I would say foreseeable, but for the moment, I should say, we are now at a point where these calls are extremely cheap. So the history of this, in 2015, Google rolled out home service ads. It was originally just for things like locksmiths, plumbers, and handymen, areas that were ripe with fraud. I was out visiting Google at the mothership a couple of years ago, and this was all the rage. They're trying to find out ways to find out how can they both give a good user experience to people within those spaces as well as make some money. And there was a lot of problems. If you ever search for locksmith online, there is so much so many bad actors out there that these LSAs, or before home service ads, became really important at sculpting that world. Personally, as they've moved into legal, and we could talk about that in the next slide, we are able to basically see that what has happened is that Google is saying, hey, we see an area for money. Now, generally in legal, there's not a lot of lead services that are breaking into the organic up there. But what they're doing is saying, hey, we want to make sure these people are legit. I don't buy that argument. But what they're doing, as you see, is these 4 different areas. You got business name, you have the number of reviews, the hours and availability, and then the year you're established. And this is one of those areas that if you have an older attorney in the firm, you can somehow bootstrap your number of years. You're trying to demonstrate points that demonstrate trust, because all you do is you get that click and you can basically get a call from it. Right now, extremely cheap. It won't last. It will be an auction eventually that brings it up. But for right now, really, really cheap clicks.
Seth, we actually have, bless you, we have a great question actually on that. So Tara says, I'm approved and ready to use LSAs, just trying to figure out a good budget. I heard you should do both LSAs. Thoughts?
My thought is, have you done PPC before? And if you haven't, I would say start with just LSAs. It is such a bargain right now. calls are not that much more, if at all, than a click. So right now, until they raise the price, you really want to maximize the exposure on LSAs. It's great you went through the process. Larger firms have had a little bit of a stickier time because there's more things to approve, whereas smaller firms very often can fly right through. But right now, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, much of the monetizable traffic is coming through the calls. So it's kind of academic. You can diversify and put stuff in both. The clicks aren't seeing as much because the LSAs are cannibalizing that traffic for now.
Excellent.
So this is exactly what I was just referring to, the effect on paid search. So basically, we did a case study. And what we saw pretty clearly to date, and again, Google wants to make more money, so I assume at some point they may push more into the organic section. But what we have seen repeatedly is that the PPC ads have been hit hardest by the LSA into the market. By rolling out LSA, what we've seen is the impressions for the number of clicks that you're getting dramatically decreased from traditional PPC Google AdWords, or Google Ads as they call them now, and that where that traffic is going is it's going to LSAs. That's why it's such a hot spot. It's new, it's shiny. It's actually a very neat conversion factor. But thankfully, to date, we have not seen a huge hit into the 3-pack organic results as far as meaningful traffic. So for those of you playing the game there, good. But it sort of goes to the question that was just asked is, you're going to see both a greater ROI in generally in getting into the LSA. And what I would say is, whatever you want to spend, it's easy to spend somebody else's money. Spend 2 or 3x or as a bid there. Now, again, you have to be able, like anything, you have to be able to put it, if it happens to spend, you should be so lucky to be able to spend it. Right now, spending on the LSAs is very tough. The calls are cheap and you just can't get enough rotation. Now, maybe test it before you go crazy. But what I have found is that, especially if you're a medium or larger player, you can't get enough budget spent. You will spend as much as they will allow at this point because the inventory is so cheap and you're not going to see it like this again for long. And, you can really see that when you see these great pictures up there, people are like, okay, I'm going to click here. I see some ads, which are more clearly labeled as ads. One of the things that I've been displeased with Google about is they say do no evil, but they historically have made the ads very difficult to tell the difference between an ad and organic. The fonts are small, the coloring is vague. And so here, for the first time, it's more apparent, hey, there's something. People may not even realize they're ads at the top, which is why they're going to get good click through. But the ads become less desirous because they're sandwiched between two more desirous opportunities of the LSAs and the 3-pack below. So the legal rollout. Let's talk about that for a moment. So the legal rollout started back in San Diego and Houston in 2019. This is sort of right after I visited Google, and they basically said, hey, we're going to test these smaller markets in trust and estates and immigration. What we saw was by the nationwide rollout happened during Q3 of 2020. And it's basically all of the B2C and a couple of the B2B areas. And it went from being, they changed the nomenclature to Google Screened. And, again, a little bit of a pain. And if it works, it's great. And you're all happy. I've had friends in Connecticut where they got turned down and it turned out, the bar association they said they weren't a member of was a voluntary bar. It's clunky. It's being outsourced. It's not Google at its best, but they're going to muscle through it. And you have to sort of play along. So the fact is, my hope is that, and it would make sense, that the Google Screen checkmark will eventually migrate its way into the 3-pack. And so to me, even if you don't want to be doing Google ads, which right now in most practice areas are desirous, there's some people that are having a hard time, like in a trust and estates where the dollars are all low dollar people and you're not a low dollar person. I've seen that happen. But generally, these are really cheap calls. And if you're set up to screen them out effectively, the ROI is certainly there for the time being. So yeah, it was a very clunky rollout. It's in the middle of COVID. Much of this is being overseas support, third party contractor running it. It's a hot mess. But the key is that once you do get it and your reviews populate, that you're able to allow for a great conversion factor. If you've curated reviews, great, because they're there. If you haven't, it's time to start doing it. So even if you weren't playing the organic game and just the paid game, all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, reviews do matter because they're a conversion factor in the number when people are deciding on who to call. We've also had tests where people didn't have reviews and yet they're still getting plenty of calls. So it is not absolute, but it is, to me, intuitively, I got to think that the number of reviews is going to help. Something also that I noticed, and I don't know if the next slide is on this or not, but it talks about, and I'll go back to job types in a second, that it's a 3.0 or higher that allows for you to be seen. And so if you go back one slide, actually, I thought it was on this one. If it's a 3.0 or higher that allows you to be seen. So even people in law, you have to try really hard to have a 3.0 average with any critical mass. And so it's demonstrating that like they haven't quite figured out lawyering. Like you would think that they would give a preference to people 4, 5 and above, but they really haven't. So somebody with a 3.0, that's got to be a pretty crappy user experience that somebody's getting if they, after a statistically number of people, are averaging that. But one of the most important factors is deciding what job areas, what types you want to be found for. And that is critically important. You know, we've liked to see people pick more, that it seems to exponentially help. At the same time, we've also playing around if there's one area that really is your bread and butter, whether or not you want to sort of make sure that you max out budget there. And that has been a challenge because right now the challenge isn't, you know, once you get it up, the challenge that we're finding is maximizing the spend. Hey, Tom, good to see you. Good buddy from Baltimore on here. Next slide. So glitches. This is what we're seeing. People getting their information being denied, the inability to submit attorney information. You know, sometimes you'll just see your job type change overnight, denial of headshots, even though it complies with their rules. And then what would you want to do? So if you want to do it, and right now it's in play, the things that'll slow you up is getting your documentation, waiting on background checks, other different approvals, and just sometimes the ads taking a while to go live. Just waiting and waiting and waiting. So those are the frustrations. It's definitely not a fun process, but we've found that with perseverance, these things can be pushed through. So basically, if you want to learn more about this, we have a bunch of guides that sort of can help you with any of these pain points. bluesharkdigital.com/guides/LSA. We have a guide that helps you figure out what are some of the hiccups you might be dealing with, how do you get around them, what are the best practices, and basically getting started. It's a how-to. If you forget how to do this, just email me, Seth@bluesharkdigital, BLU, sharkdigital.com, and I'll make sure that we get something out. You know, we run the practice. We geek out on this stuff. Emily, Nalini, myself, and the rest of our team. So don't feel like, hey, I gotta buy something from you. If you just have questions, hey, I can't get this done. How do you do this? What do you think about that? We'd like to present ourselves as an open book and just be part of that conversation. So any way that we can help you get this launched, happy to help. Even people that are in our market. Tom's called me for advice over the years. My attitude is just, you know, none of this stuff is secret sauce. It's the execution of it. And if you execute on it, it's great. It's just, you know, as Nike says, just do it and it'll work out. So this is, you know, local search. This is where I'm going to take you sort of for a moment beyond the LSAs. Right. So the LSAs are what are sort of the cause celeb right now. And again, not to be ignored, but this part of the presentation, I just recently gave at PubCon, one of the leading sort of digital marketing insider geeky conferences. And this went over and was actually the study that we're about to present was a combination of this and the one dealing with the cannibalization of AdWords was actually repurposed in search engine land. But this part of the presentation, we're going to talk about, hey, local is everything, right? And you can buy your way in there with the LSAs, but let's go back and spend a moment talking about, hey, what are some of these things that get you into the 3-pack? And proximity. We talked about the Nalini Pizza example earlier. Proximity is big. For the moment, Keywords in your name make a huge difference. Brand is great, but keywords really move the needle. Age and authority of the GMB. If you start a brand new GMB, just like you might start a website, it's not an official title, but it's almost like the sandbox that we see in launching a new website, where it doesn't immediately resonate. And local link signals. Those things seem to be the things that are moving the needle. And really, I mentioned before, I am curious as to whether that green check mark comes into play, because this area does have a fairly heavy duty amount of fraud. There are players that put spammy listings in, some bots, some stuff I've seen out of Russia. Some are just nefarious competitors, but wanting to make sure that they get those out. It's a huge cat and mouse game if you play at the higher level. Blue Shark itself, for its clients, is always trying. One of our jobs is to suppress spammy listings. If somebody puts a BS listing of a place that doesn't exist, we want to make sure that disappears to make sure our clients are in the 3-pack. And we take great pride in basically curating that area and doing everything. It's not easy and it's frustrating, but to me, getting rid of the fraud to allow you that visibility, given that you're paying for the stuff up top, if somebody's blocking you out with fraud, I want to make sure they're called out and that we're able to get the people who are rightfully belong there to be there.
And Seth, we have a question from Barry. So when you talk about the local link signals, you're referring to links on things such as baseball leagues, Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, to the website?
Correct. Yes, anything you can get. They're not super powerful, authoritative links, but they are local, and that they give Google an idea that you play in that local fishbowl. So anything you can get in that space, we're big fans of. And again, reviews. There was a point when it was just a conversion factor. Reviews still matter, and we really encourage people not to fall asleep on that. So this is a frustrating area, 3-pack filtering. As Tom, if he's still on here, knows, there's some buildings across from the street from the courthouse in downtown Baltimore that have like dozens of law firms in it. And in one sense, old school, that was a great thing. Now, one of the frustrating points that has come up is that Google has this very frustrating policy right now of filtering results, where they are only willing to show one answer in the map pack for a given type of law in a given building, and the other ones are not. So you literally need to scroll in, to push in order to find that. We have in that same page in bluesharkdigital.com/guides/LSAs, we actually have a step-by-step guide. We talk to our clients before somebody signs a lease. I want them talking to our team to say, hey, is there competition in the building? If there is it one that we have to be concerned about? Is this a building that's smart from geography in your metro? We'll talk about in a minute where you're based. But secondly, being next door to that building may be fine, but if you're in that building, it can be really problematic and your listing will be suppressed. Very frustrating given all that. Hey, Eric, how are you? I just saw you had a question up there. Where are best to get reviews? The answer is anywhere and everywhere. One of the things I like to see is, if I could wave a magic wand, the review would have geography and the type of law, workers' comp, in the Oakland area. That would be a pretty good one for you. You don't want it to be unnatural where everyone's there. Again, don't spike reviews, but the answer is having a policy, talking internally with your team. If you have to incentivize them, do whatever it takes to make sure that the happy clients you have resonate and are demonstrated through these reviews. It's so important, and it really allows for people to get that sort of result. I'll give you an example right now. As you see, I'm sitting in Florida. We drove down in the minivan after Thanksgiving. We've been sitting down here. The minivan's making some noise. It's our one car. So I'm going to business meetings. I pull up in the valet with the Porsches and Lamborghinis in my Honda Odyssey, 6 years old, 7 years old, whatever it is. And you know what? Tires and everything are gone. It's going to be we're going to be doing brakes. We're going to be doing tires. I went online and I found of the 7 places there was one place that had like a 4.7, 4.8 review with 400 reviews. I'm like, look, I don't know anything about cars. I'm a New Yorker. I have to sort of take it on faith that what I'm getting is decent. I took a shot with that because I felt like that was a better shot. I crowdsourced it. I was at Jiffy Lube getting an oil change the other day. The guy said, hey, whatever you do, don't go to this one place. But I was able to find what I think is a decent value, knowing nothing about the business, just knowing there's a crowdsourced review piece. So, keeping an eye on that. It's number and its and its quality, but I really think that's the case. And I appreciate the Get Shorty reference, because that's really what I'm playing, Eric. I'm the guy pulling up, and I'm like, dents all over the thing. I'm like, yeah, please make sure this is in good shape when I get it back. Exact match business name spam, that has been a problem. I mentioned that the name, if the name is in there, if Eric miraculously changed his name, to Oakland Workers Comp Lawyer, like that would be the best possible name for something. You have to balance the spamminess, how, what's cringe, whether you have multiple areas of practice. All of those different things really need to be put together when you figure this out. But, from the spam point of view, we're constantly fighting people that are nonsense with those names, but the name is still a powerful signal. I'm told it could be a year and a half plus or minus before they really take that out as being a search signal. On my video podcast, the SEO Insider, we've had people like Joy Hawkins and Ben Fisher on, and these guys are as connected to Google as anybody, and nobody has a good answer as to why. I mean, they have explanations. They're not good ones, which is if you have that name in there, you might be a really good answer for it. But I'm frustrated in that cheap trick is allowing people, and I feel like if they eliminated that factor, it would not penalize. It would allow people with brand to resonate, which is what they want, and not just simply jam a name into their thing with a mediocre product. So that's my, that is what we're dealing with. Next slide. So this is a really fascinating case study out of St. Louis. We had a client. We talked about where you place it. So not only do you not want to be in a building with like 20 different lawyers in it, but if your goal is to rank in a downtown metro for a given area, and you don't have an office there, and your office is in the suburb, this is for a really authoritative, nationally well-ranked website. And even with all of that, if the office isn't downtown and it's 20 miles outside of downtown, it is going to be really, really hard to rank against people that have an office and do that one type of law, especially when there's a pull down on the GMB. If you can sort of say, hey, I do immigration in this market. So what we've seen is the office location, using Eric as my foil, he may have an office in Oakland, but if he wants to rank in San Francisco for that same term and you don't have a pin on the map there, I don't care how much authority and how well known Eric is as that famous FU workers' comp lawyer, with all that digital juice, it is next to impossible to break into a market that has people there with that on the map. So next slide. So what we did was say, okay, this was before we put an office there. We said, hey, let's look at terms that aren't the money term, but maybe other categories like visa lawyer, citizenship lawyer. There, even without an office, you were able to get further and closer to the city center because it wasn't a pull down term. So if there was something that was not workers' comp that Eric's firm did, even though he's sitting in Oakland, for example, he might be able to get the authority across the bay if he has enough power and authority. But once you're competing against people where that's actually a pull down and that's a choice, then that option really goes away and you really can't make that work. So it's a combination of what are you trying to do and what is the competition, and is there a category for it when you're sort of trying to figure out how close to a city center you need to be to win something. So this was pay dirt. We said, okay, time to pony up, go go downtown, get yourself an office, pay the rent, and see what happens. And within weeks, miraculously, boom, great results. So, the bottom line is, I don't care how authoritative you are. If you're competing against the downtown metro, Using the pizza example, Google is not expecting people to drive 20 miles to get their pizza. They're not expecting people to drive 20 miles to find a lawyer, even though it may be an awesome lawyer like Eric they should do that for. The fact is that Google's not going to give that to you, so that until you decide to pony up and give yourself a presence, there's a whole nother discussion for another day on how people have worked with Regis's, and the Google has gone after that, and they keep tightening their guidelines not to use shared offices. So the question is, how can you find something cost effective that gives you a presence so that you can get that ranking locally? And really, this is the sort of the takeaway, which is we've seen a dramatic demonopolization of local search results over the last few years. It's become more difficult to dominate an entire city or market as Google starts to weigh factors differently. Some of the most important elements affecting ranking are the proximity of the address to the search, the physical address of the city search, and the GMB categories. If you figure those things out and you're able to get your office, get your GMB categories, that's what we're seeing. The good news is for many people on here, because it's not like we have the juggernauts of each of these markets there is a demonopolization where it is harder to own a market, and that they're giving people a chance. So good on the way up, but it means that you have to do more and more, work as a dominant player to make sure that you maintain that traffic. That's really something that we are focused on intently, and making sure that we give everybody the chance to get as much as possible. So I hope this was useful. As I mentioned before, our team, Emily, Nalini, myself, love geeking out on this. My cell phone is on there. If we can be of help, just talking stuff through, getting you over the line, that nothing pleases me more if we can push you in the right direction. We are very passionate about this. It has been something that has transformed a lot. My 2 cents is pick up the easier money you can with LSAs while it lasts. It will not last. If we're at $200 a call in some markets, wouldn't shock me to see $800 in the future. If you happen to be in a market where you can pick up calls for $30, my feeling is front end your marketing budget towards that while it's there. Particularly, we have some family lawyers here. I don't know if there's a trust and estates person before. Those areas are not hyper competitive there. And one thing that we've seen is until there are a few people wanting the LSA, it doesn't even show. So one thing that we've done for some clients is made sure that we have at least 2 people in the market to get it up there, because it is a really valuable piece of real estate. I'm still bullish long-term on organic. We've built a firm to 40 lawyers. We've helped, hundreds of our own clients over time. But I really encourage you, to sort of take advantage of opportunities when they exist, but at the same time, stay away from the numerous shiny objects out there. I'm a big fan of building authority, whether it's a Barry video content strategy, but you know what? Make sure that there's a WordPress website behind it that you can start putting those things on. You may not have the time and resources or money right now to fully SEO a site, but if you start working on it, I started with a $50 a month templated website way back in the day. It was before Wix, but assume like a Wix. And I bought every bell and whistle. Every month I added another option, it went from 50 to 100 to 200. At one point I was spending about $500 a month with this $50 a month website company. And the owner called me up eventually and said, hey, buddy, you've graduated. It's time for you to go fly. So I spent the last, decade really geeking out on this technical piece. And at the end of the day, the things that you guys all have at your disposal are building authoritative content in whatever form and fashion you love, and finding links to show the authority that you have out there. So thank you so much. If you have other questions, drop them there. But otherwise, I hope you found this useful, and we get to talk offline and help you on your journey, making sure that you take advantage of every bell and whistle that Google has to offer today. Thanks again.
Awesome. Any other questions? We only have about 4 minutes left in our session, but
I was just going to give people a chance to hit the restroom before the rest of the day continues. But this has been a fun ride. We got a lot of some new friends on here. I've loved getting to know Eric over the years. He's a very creative marketer. Barry, love to. I'm going to check out your stuff and see how you're doing. Obviously Chicago, hyper competitive market with a bunch of TV players and digital players for that matter. Love to, watching what you Jerry Oginski does. I get, every once in a while, his assistant sends us something into our market, but the fact that he's as like a one-man band working out of his house has been able to create a following. I've seen it. People sit there and watch his videos for hours. If you've lost a loved one or had something happen, not just from New York, his borders are gone. He's no longer just a New York attorney in the sense that he has now created a national following. And I think that if you watched the seminar earlier, that people talked about, digging deep where you like it. I'm a big fan of doing what you love. And the fact is, if you love making videos, God bless. When you have the resources, get somebody to build the static content and then supplement those, filling those in with those videos, get them transcribed, continue to add content. In the family world, we're the Northern Virginia market with a family practice. Right now we are in a moment where people coming out of the pandemic and in the pandemic, we're seeing divorce rates rise. Anything you can do right now to get in front of people. I don't, you never want to be in the point where you can't service clients, but I feel like we are in a moment in time between LSAs and the frustration of the pandemic that if you're able to, in a family sense, take in the cases meaningfully, I don't want to say warehouse them. The courts are working slowly. You'll deal with it later by, bring in the labor you need to service it. But this is an opportunity that I don't think it's a really great opportunity, particularly in the family law space. There are areas that I thought early on in the pandemic would pan out much better, like trust and estates. And while the planning soared, probate, at least in many of the major metropolitan markets, really came to a grinding halt because people couldn't get through the courts and the revenue was just down. So I think it's looking at those signals and figuring out what works for you in your market and what resources you have. And I'll conclude just saying, one of the thresholds we talk about is a practice, getting yourself to $350,000. If you can get to that type of annualized revenue, then you're at a point where you can sort of dig deep and spend some money meaningfully on marketing without hurting your bottom line, knowing that it's going to build further. I'm a big fan when you first start out for that first 100, 200,000, we've done things like created a lower dollar product called Silver Shark that's sort of basically a souped up website taking advantage of the local that you could add videos, add reviews into and keep that platform going. So thank you for your time. Great having everybody here and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks again.